JKB back with another episode. Today on the show I'm reviewing God of War. Thank you to Sony for sending over the review copy. There's many reasons why people fear change in life. Maybe it's because they know change brings new problems. Maybe it's the lack of trust in the one making the changes. Or maybe it's simply a fear of uncertainty. God of War comes with many changes, but after experiencing these changes, I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt, they've delivered a remarkable game on almost every front. There's 4 major changes. The first controversial change was removing the ability to freely jump in the game. The second being the removal of Kratos' signature weapons, the double chain blades. The third change being the camera system, which was moved away from a free floating camera system to a third-person camera limited view. And lastly, the voice actor of Kratos has been replaced. I'm going to cover all of these changes in the review, but I want to start with a simple outline of the story, and this will be spoiler-free. The story is about the son of Kratos becoming a man. There's a simple motivation which I will not talk about here, but this motivation sends Kratos and his son on a very emotional and important journey across the lands. The supporting cast of characters that you will come across in the game have very pronounced personalities. And for a game that was in development for over 5 years, you can clearly see the level of understanding on how to make characters come to life in a video game has been perfectly executed here. The relationship between Kratos and his son is very complicated. You'll watch the relationship grow on screen. This aspect of the game is its strongest part. Capturing real human emotions in video games isn't exactly easy, and very few games have had the talent behind them to reach this level of storytelling in a video game. I admittedly wasn't into the idea of having your son in the game at all. I thought it would drag down the action and the pacing of a series that's known for its over-the-top action and incredible violence. But for the first hour of the game, I thought it was a brilliant idea to take the story in this direction. I can admit I feared the changes, but I gave this game a chance to be its own creation based on a character that we all love. But it needed to mature into something more than simply being a video game character. The story in this game is beyond what I expected, and the interaction with your son during the gameplay isn't what you'll expect. You have one button that's used to control what your son will do in the game. You use this button like an extra ability during battles. Your son will fire his arrows at enemies and cause them to react to his attack, and this will give you an opportunity to attack those enemies. You will also use your son to figure out puzzles and reach unreachable areas in the game. Overall, the interaction with your son is incredible, but not without a few minor issues of your son not keeping up to you as you explore the map. At times, you would turn around to figure out where he was, and you'd find him randomly standing in another room asking, "Where did you go, father?" The simple idea here is Kratos and his son are not the same person. Kratos is a god who will stop at nothing to take care of his enemies. However, his son is very down to earth, with emotions that Kratos understands but doesn't feel himself. The dynamic is carried through the whole game and forces Kratos to look into himself and deal with emotions that we've never seen him deal with before. The story really hit home for me personally because of my relationship with my father, and it's definitely a story I will never forget. Removing the jump ability might have seemed like a strange choice, but its removal is something that needed to happen to make the combat feel new and refreshing. There's a sense of real power behind most of Kratos' new attack moves, and removing the jump has given the combat a more mature feeling. Combat itself is broken down into a light attack and a strong attack. The strong attack takes a few more seconds to use but deals more damage. As you progress through the story, you'll unlock and discover new abilities that can be chained together with your basic attacks. You'll also be able to upgrade the bow and arrow your son uses throughout the game. The Leviathan axe is an absolute blast to use. You use the L2 trigger to line up your axe and the R2 trigger to toss it. The axe will start out with the ability to freeze some of the enemies in place. The best part of using the axe is that you can recall it to come back flying into your hand from anywhere on the map. This means you can toss it into a tree in the background and run into a battle only using your bare knuckle hands. But at any moment, you have the ability to recall the axe from the tree, which will cause damage to anything between you and the tree. As you can imagine, this is beyond fun to use during major boss fights. The axe is also used to freeze switches in the game during puzzles, and it can also be upgraded as you progress through the story. All of that being said, I can say using a weapon like this in the game is extremely satisfying. However, if you're playing the game on either the easy or normal difficulty level, you can easily use this axe to cheaply kill enemies from a distance. But to play this way is totally up to you at the end of the day. I was slightly missing the double chain blades at times, but I'm alright with the change because it works alongside the rest of the new combat system. As for the third major change in the game, which is the camera, I felt that moving the camera closer to a character gave it a more intimate feeling. The closer camera is also tied into the combat itself. At times, some may find it very frustrating to have to swing the camera around at the last second to block a fireball attack from across the environment. But this added into the overall feeling of how the combat has been changed. No longer is the game about button mashing. There's a strategy here. You'll have the ability to block at the last second before being attacked, which if timed correctly will give you a few extra seconds to counter the oncoming attack and lay down a combo of your own. I will say that early on in the game, I did feel a little frustrated with the combat because it was extremely hard to turn around in time to block oncoming attacks from behind. But once the game told me I could push the D-pad down to do an instant turnaround, it did start to feel much better and it worked to my advantage. New to the game is the RPG elements that are tied into the armor for the most part. For the first time in a God of War game, you can switch out Kratos' armor. He has chest armor, waist armor, and wrist armor. These armor parts can be crafted using hack silver, which is a kind of currency in the game. You'll also come across gear randomly as you progress the story. You'll notice that the gear is also broken down into the usual common, uncommon, or even rare types. The system itself is designed to let you customize Kratos the way you want. This is where the game did start to feel a little confusing to me, and I think I won't be the only person feeling this way after playing 3 hours of the game. Once you get a grip on the convoluted systems in place, you'll appreciate the RPG elements just a little bit more. There's also enchantment sockets on the gear that you find, which will only add power to the gear itself and give you different abilities. All of this comes together to give you a sense of control over Kratos. There's also skills that are unlocked using your XP that's collected during gameplay. There's ranged combat, close combat, shield combat, rage combat, magic combat, and expert combat skill trees. I can assure you that these skills are what makes the game fun to play. Unlocking new skills and figuring out how they can be chained together in combos is what this game is all about. I should put out there that there's also a rage mode during normal gameplay. There's a rage meter that fills during combat, and once it's full, you can go into full Spartan rage. This is useful for boss battles. I don't want to give away too much, but when it comes to combat in the game, I will say that the combat is beyond fulfilling and very rewarding. You won't believe the level of detail in the environments around you. From the lush forests down into the deep caves, you'll constantly be impressed with its artistry. This is the best looking PlayStation 4 game to date. Not that I felt that graphics are what made games good. There's one action set piece at the start of the game that rivals anything you've ever seen in any superhero movie. My jaw was on the desk from what I saw, and I won't even spoil it here. I think there's a fair amount of variety in the enemy types you'll encounter. I will say that the mid-boss battles are back and incredible and challenging. The level of violence does seem to be toned down slightly, or at least done with a less in-your-face tone. There's violence here, but I have to say at this point, the game doesn't really even need it. Norse mythology has replaced the Greek mythology from the past games, and everything from the enemies to the environment reflects this change. I do feel like the mythology doesn't play a major role in this game during the first 4 or 5 hours. It's less about using the mythology and more about the core story element between Kratos and his son. Let's get into the pros and cons of God of War 2018. Starting with the pros, due to the nature of this story, you won't need to play any of the past games in this series, and this is considered to be a soft reboot, and I consider this to be a pro. You don't have to go back and play the past games. Graphically speaking, this is the best looking PlayStation 4 game to date. The story is the justifying reason why this series has evolved from its hack and slash roots. Gameplay is as smooth as you would expect after a 5-year development cycle. Kratos is taken a little more seriously with the new voice actor playing him. The dynamic between your son is incredible. Replay is tied into the RPG elements. The game is an open world but broken into parts of a map. You'll see branching paths all the time, but you won't see everything during your first playthrough. The RPG upgrade system is what will make you come back and play the game more. The sound design is absolutely amazing, and mixed with the animation, this is one of the most cinematic experiences I've had since The Last of Us. Lastly, for the pros, I want to bring up the NPCs, which react to what you do around them, and this is something I haven't seen in games in the past, because they'll comment on the next area of the map, but also if you interrupt them or interact in the environment around them, they feel like real characters because they will make comments based on what you do around them. I was very impressed with the NPCs, and it just made this game feel even more real. Getting into the cons, I have to say that the RPG elements are very convoluted and confusing to new players and even past players of God of War games. These are RPG elements, but just overall presented in a very convoluted and confusing UI. The last con is something I just felt, and at times I felt like I was playing a game that was trying to stand out from its past. It was like it was trying to evolve into something new and fresh, and for the most part, the story and the character of Kratos did just that, but some of the game does feel stuck in its roots. Overall, I'm going to give God of War 2018 a solid 8.5 out of 10. I want to thank Sony again for sending over the review copy. If you guys have any more questions about God of War or the combat systems, let me know in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer you right away. I'll see you guys on the next episode of JKB.